So let's talk about term limits because you mentioned that Trudeau has been there a long time. He's kind of reached his expiration date. Is it not time in Canada to start looking at term limits?
Yeah, term limits are kind of an interesting kind of perennial debate that we have in politics. On one hand, you want term limits to kind of bring in fresh breath of fresh air every once in a while. We want to clear out kind of old politicians, old ways of thinking. On the other hand, politics is can be a challenging job, and sometimes you want veterans in the role who actually know the ropes, know the institutions, that can actually like exert some control over the bureaucrats in their department. And so in Canada, of course, we have term limits in the United States. They're quite stringent. A little bit harder to create that in Canada, but it could certainly be done. And I'm as time goes on, I'm more and more open to the idea of term limits than I was in the past. I do think we need to have more turnover of politicians in Canada. It would benefit the country.
I mean, we've heard it for years and years and years, the term career politicians, and there's a lot of career politicians. And, I wrote an article in the Winnipeg Sun about politics and the money they make and so on. And some commenter went on and said, well, we should be paying politicians more and we would get better people. I can tell you, as somebody in politics, it's not the money. It's the abuse and it's your personal life being dragged into something that doesn't belong in there. But I also think it's term limits because I think every party, I know our system doesn't allow for that right now, but even parties could say, okay, we are going to have a two-term limit for our party leaders. And then we're going to bring in a different leader, a fresh voice, a fresh face, a fresh perspective. And then that allows you to have MLAs or MPs that have the experience that you're alluding to, which I think is wrong because it does create career politicians. But nonetheless, it's a valid point. But maybe parties need to take the step. Maybe they need to lead the pack here and say, okay, when you're elected as our leader, you have two terms. And after those two
Yeah.
terms, you're done, and we're going to bring in a different leader. So we don't have to change the legislation. We don't have to change the way we do things in Canada. Which political parties have to start making the change. And I think that's where it starts.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you have politicians that are just really talented, really good at their jobs, and so they succeed. They can last forever. But an awful lot of the time, you just have politicians that are just kind of entrenched in the local party. They can win every nomination contest. They're untouchable, and they're in a strong party seat. And so they just sit there and win and win and win, not because they're particularly talented. It's just they have a particular skill set. And they're popular in the local party, and they can last forever. I think if some of those people, they don't, I appreciate the contribution. I think it's important to put people to put their names forward. But yeah, at a certain point, it's like, well, maybe, province, the country would benefit from getting someone new in there, some new ideas and a fresh face. So yeah, it used to be the case that people thought about politics as a service. You went out and you had a career, you're a man or the woman of your community, you do a great job, and then you take some time and you commit it to this service. You run for office, you do your time, and then you move on back to your career, spend time with your family. That's changing. There's a lot more career politicians in Canada. It really changes politics as well. So people have concerns about that. Term limits are a way to address that.
And some of these career politicians aren't necessarily politicians anymore, in my view. I find them a lot of people that we've elected right now are activists. They come in with one or two main objectives or special interest groups that they want to represent, which, becomes their mantra when they're in office, and we lose that a government serving everybody. And an example of that, in my opinion, is what's happening with the Manitoba NDP. We have some ministers that are very focused on special interest groups and they're focused on the popularity, right? They want to be popular. So they're busy on their social media channels. And in our next segment, I want to talk about something that happened with the health minister in Manitoba and get your thoughts on that.